So good day, everyone, and welcome to our SMART webinar series, and welcome to today's webinar, What Interactive Data Can Tell You About Your Culture of Engagement. So now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Nikki Reiner with Holleran Consulting. And Nikki is an experienced facilitator and presenter. She has served as Holleran's president since 2013, partnering with senior living communities to interpret research findings, manage national research on social accountability efforts of senior living providers, and facilitate action planning sessions with leadership teams to evaluate research results and implement change. Nikki believes not only in the importance of maximizing the engagement and satisfaction of residents, staff, and leadership teams within a senior living community, but also of collaborating and forming partnerships within the external community. Nikki is a sought-after guest lecturer at various state, regional, and national senior living conferences on a variety of subjects, including strategy, social accountability, engagement, and satisfaction research, and community health. She leads the Holleran Leadership Engagement Program, a 20-hour experience designed specifically for frontline leaders and supervisors. So we are thrilled to have Nikki here with us today. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Andrea. I appreciate so much the introduction, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. During our previous two sessions, we reviewed outstanding results of Maplewood Parks Place resident and employee engagement survey. And during those sessions, we talked about why marrying engagement and satisfaction are important, as well as we heard from Maplewood Park Place's team on, what best practices they created to create a culture where engagement really truly is paramount. So today, we're going to spend time reviewing their actual results through a dynamic reporting portal. And this dynamic reporting really can provide an entirely new world to understanding survey data. So let me just start by saying two things. First, I wanted to thank Maplewood Park Place's leadership, resident, as well as their team members. We have just thoroughly enjoyed this opportunity to partner with them in a brand new way, and it's been a privilege to review their data as a case study over these last several webinars. And secondly, before we get started on viewing what this data portal system can provide, I just want to say that Holleran isn't a tech company. Our expertise truly lies in providing our client partners with clear insights from their key stakeholders and working to harness those insights to create data-driven results that will ultimately position them as premier providers in the service area. If I step back to when we began building our data portal, I had numerous conversations with executive teams who were searching for systems that were not only user-friendly, but that would provide some really meaty and in-depth perspectives. But many of those conversations ended with comments such as, I need a system that allows our organization to slice and dice our survey data at a moment's notice, but doesn't require us to have a full-time analyst to help us do it. And so that really was the premise of how we looked at creating this data portal. So our intent was to do just that, to create a user-friendly, easy-to-navigate data portal that would just provide some really fresh insights. And so I'm excited to share it with you today as we review Maplewood Park Place's results. So if you had a chance to join Michelle Holleran, who presented the last two webinars in the Maplewood Park Place team, you know that their engagement results were stellar. Great results can actually sometimes be challenging as you continue to experience, you want to continue experiencing those stellar results, but from a static standpoint, a static report standpoint, it can be a struggle to sometimes find relevant insights as you're looking to create action items. The dynamic reporting system can really give you a deeper understanding into your engagement story and begin to guide those directives. So let me start by changing to the first tab here on the respondent information. So what we're looking at here are the demographics created by Maplewood Park Place. Some of these are standard and a part of the everyday survey process as we launch our survey development, but we also allow for some customized demographics on this. So you can see a couple different things here. First of all, this is the independent living results solely. All we're looking at here is that level of care. You can see that response rate was at a 92.3%, absolutely incredible. Breakouts as things as length of residence and typical year of birth, marital status. And then the would you recommend, we consider that a demographic here at Holler. It really allows you to look at all of your factors by the would you recommend opportunity. And I'll show you that a little bit more when we go into the customized tab here that allows you to slice and dice at that moment's notice. A couple things that Maplewood Park Place added in is that overall quality of life, as well as have you used rehab in the past 12 months. Again, just to offer us some additional insights as we look at how people are experiencing their quality of life and then how they're experiencing the culture on the individual campus as well. And we'll look at that in a few moments. The next tab that we're stepping into here is Maplewood Park Place's Engagement Index. So this tab really is the big picture engagement view. As we mentioned in our resident engagement webinar, this engagement index is showcasing how Maplewood Park Place's results compares to others in our benchmark. So this is solely in understanding how they compared up against their peers. You can see from a score of 8 being at that far right-hand side of having a more engaging campus than most others in our benchmark, is that the residents are finding their campus to be much more engaging than the peers that they're being compared to here. If we would break this into the engagement domains, so as we mentioned in our previous webinars, there are 4 domains. How a resident feels about their opportunity to be heard in voice, their opportunity to have connection within the campus with friends, relatives, other residents, and even the team, how they're feeling fulfilled in their day-to-day life, as well as what their well-being is coming in at from a physical, mental, and spiritual perspective. You can see here that at Maplewood Park Place, every domain scored a ranking in the top 10th of our benchmark. So really some incredibly strong results here in their independent living engagement. We can look at that from a little bit tighter of a view. So here what you're doing is you're seeing the 16 engagement factors, 4 under each domain. So 4 connected to voice, connection, fulfillment, and well-being, totaling that 16. What you can see here is the individual factors that are used, and there's a hover feature. So in that hover feature, you can see the full question, where here they're abbreviated on this side of the screen. But we can see their individual scores from 2017, as well as how they rank in that percentile benchmark. There's highlighting that's happening here. Every single one of these factors fell into the top 15th of the Holler and benchmark. So let's see how they did on satisfaction. Here we're seeing a much broader vantage point of what each of their individual factors are. Maplewood Park Place has worked with us for a multitude of years, but here what we're seeing is their results year by year, as well as an average yearly change, and then how their current year results fall into that percentile benchmark. You can see the index or the legend up here that tells you that orange is in the top 15th percentile of the benchmark. If they fell within the 16th to the 18th percentile of the benchmark, it's a light blue, and the bottom 15th would be a green. You'll notice here that there were a couple of blanks. That just means that that factor was customized for Maplewood Park Place and didn't have a benchmark percentile. The next slide is a great visual to help you understand where their highest scoring factors were versus some of their lowest scoring factors. So here you can see on the heat map color legend that the lowest factor of all of the factors combined here had a score of a 3.73 the whole way up to a 4.90. So my immediate eye is going towards the orange. You can see some incredibly strong scores. Again, the hover feature allows us to see the questions exactly as it was asked on their survey tool. We can see that the accessibility of the executive director scored at a 4.83, and from the heat map, it tells us was one of their strongest scores, as well as the responsiveness of the executive director. But as we look at year to year, this has been strong for Maplewood Park Place over the last 3 years of results. We can see a little bit of a shading difference, but still all in orange here. But what also my eye goes to is just one factor showing up in the green, and that is the service in the dining room. As you can see from the hover feature, not only does it tell me the full name of the survey factor, but it also gives me an N value. So I can see that in 2015, 169 of their residents completed this factor and scored it at a 3.73. Here, 186 scored it at a 3.97, and again, a 3.91. So as you're looking at this, it really starts to paint a picture of how things are going from an engagement standpoint and how they're moving from a satisfaction standpoint. Go here to the next tab, and this is frequencies. Again, the visual here can be pretty powerful. We're reviewing the frequencies of the scores for those 16 engagement factors. So immediately my eyes are drawn to Maplewood Park Place encourages me to pursue meaning in my life. So if you look here, you can see this factor had less in that 5 category than all of the others. When combining those 4s and 5s, we can see the least amount of agreement in this factor, but the strongest with addresses issues as well as being as socially active as I like. Again, you can see the N values in the ratings of the 4s and the 5s. And even in this pursue meanings, although they had 11.7 in that neutral category, that N value was only 21. So 21 of their residents rated that at a neither agree nor a disagree. So this is all helping to paint the picture of how we really want to look and dive into the results as we start to think about what we might want to slice and dice. It's just giving us another picture. The satisfaction factors, on the other hand, their frequencies paint a bit of a different picture from the engagement factors. So clearly we can see some incredibly strong results in accessibility and responsiveness. So if you look at the combined factors here in 4s and 5s, under the accessibility of the ED, 98% of those who completed this factor scored it as an excellent or a good. And then when we look at responsiveness, we see that 97.5% scored that as an excellent and a good. So just some really strong factors here around how they're feeling about the executive directors. Now, if we shift to one factor that didn't score quite as strong, we can see it here in the dining room, the service in the dining room. So you can see there was more in that neutral category. So again, it's helping to really paint the picture of what we need to look at a little more close. So all of these previous tabs become the precursor to what we have opportunity here to do. So this is a screen that allows us to really slice and dice what specifically is going on at Maplewood Park Place. And I must tell you that this is one of my favorite features of this new data portal. So this tab allows Maplewood Park Place to evaluate their results on a much more deeper level. And from our previous view, we know that accessibility as well as responsiveness from the executive director were two of their highest scoring factors. So let's see if when we slice it, and that we can see any additional differences. So let's break it down by length of residence. So what you're seeing here is a heat map that continues, but by each individual factor. So we can see how those are feeling that have been with the organization and just moved in within the last 6 months, 6 months to 1 year, 2 to 3 years, and so on. What we're seeing here in this green is folks who wouldn't have completed that demographic and maybe just wanted to stay anonymous. We would have provided these results if there had been more than 8 people in that no response category, but what we're seeing is it didn't meet our criteria for maximum amount of respondents or minimum amount of respondents. So you can see that 5 people completed that factor without a demographic listed, but it wasn't enough to get a score. So as we look at the accessibility of the executive director and the responsiveness of the executive director, I wanted to go through across here the whole way and see if everybody's feeling the same. And really, these scores are pretty tightly packed. We can see really strong results the whole way across in these 2 factors. What we also know is that there was some concern around the service in the dining room. So is everybody, regardless of their length of stay, feeling the same way? We're not seeing the same story here. So we can see that those who have been with the organization and have lived there for the 11 to 15-year time frames are scoring this the lowest out of all of the age grouping. We also see 3 others, the more than 15 years, the 4 to 5 years, and the 2 to 3 years, scoring it about at the same place. But we're seeing very different results when you look here from the 6 months to the 1 year to the less than 6 months. Really, again, it allows us to understand, is there some place that we should be honing in if Maplewood Park Place would decide that dining in their service in their dining room was something that they wanted to work on. This immediately allows them to see the breakout by groupings and where maybe they should focus some of their questions. If they talked to the group who had been with the organization from 11 to 15 years, they might find out some additional insights about what it would be that would be important for them to see differently in the dining room. However, if you do this in reverse and you also talk to those who have been there for less than 6 months, you could also find out how they are feeling things are going really well and allow yourself to harness that positivity as well. You can see special dietary requests here are coming up with a strong score from those less than 6 months, and we have some lower scores across the board. So again, it just really allows you to understand what's important to the various groupings. Another great feature here is if, let's say, the dining director at Maplewood Park Place would like to just understand if the dining features or the dining factors in one grouping and not see it all in just one large grid like this. So then the dining director could actually go in and pull the factors that only reflect the dining environment. Get one more here. So you can choose multiple factors and really allow you to see what's going on in one particular department all in one fell swoop by just looking at the factors that would be relatable to that department. You can go back, you can click the all again, and there's some different ways here. You can also see, are there some issues as we look at the year of birth? and we don't see as many differences here as we break it down by year of birth. So there's a couple. And then one last time, if we wanted to see, okay, how are people feeling about their overall quality of life? And we can see that those who were in this category of just all right were scoring factors much lower than those who were feeling good or very good. Now, you might be saying to yourself right now, isn't that pretty typical? And actually, in some of our benchmark comparisons, when we've mined those benchmarks, what we've seen is that people who are feeling like they have a poorer health, overall quality of life, actually have more connection with the staff and team and end up scoring the factors a little bit higher. So this isn't exactly what I would always expect to see. So again, it's always really interesting to be able to slice and dice and see if there's something going on that maybe could direct your action plans as you're looking at where you would want to focus your efforts over the next couple of months. And then here, we're not going to have time to go into all of Maplewood Park Place's results, but we thought it was important that you see how those different levels of care, bringing them all into one dashboard spreadsheet, could really help you understand certain things that you wanted to look at in a deeper level. So here in independent living, you can see the satisfaction mean, you can see the individual engagement domain means, you can see the would you recommend, but you can also see that bumped up against the results from assisted living. 100% of their assisted living residents said that they would absolutely recommend them to a family member or a loved one. Pretty strong results. And here we're seeing in skilled nursing also an 87.5% of would you recommend. So again, it's just another part of their story about how it's not just one level of care that's doing really strong or having some really strong results. It is in absolutely every level of care within Maplewood Park Place. So let's see if we can tether what's happening with the residents with what's happening with the team members here. So for the sake of time, I am going to skip a little further ahead and not go through all of these individual groupings. Having a hard time getting my, well, we might just, here we go. So you can see all the same opportunity can be harnessed here for the team members, where we can understand really what's going on with them. So let's start here with survey findings. Again, what we're looking at here is the individual results from year over year and how that compares to the deviation found from the midpoint of the Halloran benchmark. We can see a variety of different things happening here, where we are getting darker orange from 2016 to 2017. We're seeing improvement in most of these categories. The one area that's sticking out where we have a little bit of a lower score is that competitive wage. Now, it's not unusual for competitive wage to hit at the bottom of the benchmark for all communities. Most of the communities that I work with, this competitive wage question does come up at the bottom 5 of most organizations. But let's see where we see some really strong scores. We see having respect for their supervisor, their work is appreciated, knowing what's expected of me, and overall satisfaction scoring at an 89.0 and up 4.5 points from what they had seen in 2016. If we go into the engagement factors. Here what you're seeing is their overall team member engagement. So a lot like we're looking for the opportunity for residents to connect and that engagement for an independent living perspective, here what we're doing is looking at the team member engagement for Maplewood Park Place. So at the very top, you can see what their level of engagement is. And I just have to say that this was unbelievable when we looked at their level of engagement. So when you combine their catalysts and their advocates, who would be what we would call the orange zone, but their most highly engaged employees, this equates to a 65%. When you look at how they're coming in. If you look at that compared to the Holleran benchmark, you're seeing a pretty big difference here. You can also see that they took their resistors, those who were the most disengaged in 2016, from 20% of their workforce, so 1 in 5 of their team was disengaged, the whole way down to only 7.7 members of their team being completely disengaged. When you look at that compared to the Holleran benchmark, here you can see our benchmark has an average of 25.1% of employees who take this survey come in that green resistor category. So we can see some really, really strong results. And let me just go back here to the survey findings and point out something. So you can see from the engagement that the staff is really feeling quite appreciated, that their opinions count, they have the opportunity to do the best, they feel like they're a part of a team that is producing meaningful results. They are finding immense purpose in what they get to do every day when they walk through the doors of that organization. They feel completely and totally appreciated. So even though competitive wage came in a little bit lower for them, one of their lower scoring factors, I think this really supports the case that, once again, it's not necessarily about the dollars and cents. While it's important that we're paying our teams the best to our abilities, what we're finding here is that the engagement from the team is seeping out, even though they're feeling like maybe their competitive wage is a little bit lower than what they would like it to see. So engagement really can take you to a completely different level when you have engagement with your team. And I feel like that's what we're seeing as we seep into what's happening in the independent living results as well. We're seeing unbelievably high results as far as resident engagement is concerned. And I really strongly believe that it is all tethered to how the employees are feeling about their personal missions being able to be fulfilled absolutely every single day when they walk through this organization. So here we can even see a breakout by department engagement. It's important for us to understand, is one department maybe not feeling the same as the others? So what we're seeing, and if we talk about what we see in the Holleran benchmark, it is not uncommon for administration to be your most highly engaged department. They're the individuals who are making the decisions, obviously, but they're also the ones that understand the work that's going to be put into the mission and vision moving forward, and they're excited about that mission and vision. So we often find that administration is the most highly engaged. Where we find the departments that are the most disengaged come from nursing and dining. We often find that those departments can have anywhere. I've worked with organizations where 25% of those departments were disengaged, the whole way up to about 58% of those departments being disengaged. So you can imagine what kind of challenge that becomes when you have so many of the team that are disengaged and they're the ones giving the direct care and having direct connections every day with the residents. So we really want to make sure we're understanding the level of disengagement from these departments that have such a high touch as well. So you can see here that in food and beverage in their dining department, there is 16.2%. But as we look at the end value, which is really important for us to be paying attention to, it equates to 6 individuals. So when you look at even a department with the highest level of disengagement here, it's much better than what we're seeing on average in the Halloran benchmark. But again, the more that you understand about the nuances in the departments and the nuances in how the factors are being coded, it allows you to understand where your next work will be. Again, you can get custom breakouts on this. So what we can do here is break it down by department and work group. Oftentimes, this really helps us land on what's going on maybe in the skilled nursing department or in the food and beverage. So where you can see here, again, management and supervisors didn't have enough. They were just too shy on all of these factors to get that individual breakout. We want to make sure that we can guarantee everybody's confidentiality, so we always require a minimum of at least 8 people in any grouping in order to give those scores. But here you can see in food and beverage, we do have some that are landing a little bit lower. Their opinions counting is a little bit lower than what we're seeing in some of the others, as well as trusting the leadership, and then staff issues being resolved quickly, and the workload of your team being distributed fairly. The great thing about this is that when you do see where there's areas that are very strong, you can even have an internal best practice. So here, as we looked in activities in assisted living, we're finding that everybody scored this as a 5 as they were asked, did they have respect for their manager? The leadership in that activities in assisted living is incredibly strong and might give some additional best practices to some of the other departments that maybe aren't scoring as high in those areas. Also here have a key metric page. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to look at a variety of different components, and we asked Maplewood Park Place to provide to us their yearly turnover as well as the occupancy in their independent living. So this page allowed them to say what's important to us and what is it that we want to be keeping an eye on. As we look at our strategic vision and where we're going long term, what are the core components for us to keep a really close eye on that will help us make sure that we're meeting that long-term measurement that we're looking to secure. So here you can see they chose the employee engagement mean. You have the breakout by employee engagement. Residents would you recommend? Their engagement index, independent living occupancy, and the turnover. What we're looking at currently is how the team feels overall. But the great thing is that we could also break this down by a variety of different components. For the sake of today's presentation, we can also break it down by full-time and part-time. And here we can see the difference in the full-time and part-time turnover, in the engagement index for employees who come in as a part-time FTE and those who come in as full-time. Again, just allowing you to see different perspectives here can really help move your next steps. So I know Maplewood Park Place is a single site, but if you bear with me here, I'm going to switch screens and we're going to go into what it would look like if all of Sunrise utilized this system. So again, I just want to show you a couple different screens here. So for large multi-sites, one of the additional breakouts that you can do is by community. So here you can see that for the sample's sake, you've got 5 communities. Now, obviously, we could, craft this to be larger. It could also be crafted to be dissected by region or by state, but this gives you an idea of what would happen if Sunrise collectively had all their communities come through here. This allows us, through this heat mapping phase, to see that Community 2 is struggling a little bit in comparison to 1, 3, and 4. Community 5, their scores are top-notch, really scoring very strongly. And you can see that at a really quick glance from this heat mapping. Now, if you remember, just a couple minutes ago, we talked about the fact that sometimes nursing departments really struggled. So what we could do here is also break it down in an additional way by the individual department. This allows us to see by community how each one of the nursing departments are doing. And now we're seeing a little bit of a different picture. We're seeing the Community 2 is still scoring lower. However, Community 3 and Community 4 are also experiencing some challenges. Again, we see Community 5 really having some strong results. Another best practice opportunity. So one of the great things is by utilizing this system that you can see where your best practices lie, but then also we can work with you to help you decide, is there other best practices that are happening across the nation that maybe you could be shared to help you with one of the areas in which you're struggling. There's also a extra component here that I want to show you, and that's filterable comments. Now, obviously, we wanted to protect Maplewood Park Place and their comments. So what we did here is we wanted to show it to you in the demo form. This allows you to see comments, but as you're looking at my screen, you're probably figuring out that they're not real comments. This is actually comments taken from Alice in Wonderland and put in to filter in for some comments. But again, you can see what's happening in each one of the communities. You can sort your comments by all communities in the nursing. So now you can start to tether what's happening in your results alongside of what people are saying from the comments. The other great feature, and I often, as I talk with the team, they laugh at me a little bit because I am super excited by the opportunity to filter comments by level of engagement. So as I was working with a larger multi-site and their executive team a couple of weeks ago, we were looking at their opportunity to filter their comments. And one of their executives actually said to me, Nikki, come on, I'm pretty sure that I can determine who my resistors are by my comments and who my catalysts are by my comments. And then I sorted them for him. And what he saw was that he actually didn't filter people the way that they actually had landed. And what we were able to discover was that some of their highest engaged employees, their catalysts and advocates, were feeling a lot of burnout. And so we were able to give some additional insight by filtering the comments by just those highly engaged employees to say what was most important to them. And it was a great opportunity for that organization to understand that if they didn't start to figure out some different work-life balances, that they were most likely going to lose a good amount of their catalysts and advocates. And that allowed them to take a different game plan than what they would have had they not been able to see their comments filtered by engagement category. And then finally here, as we wrap up, I wanted to show you what this would look like from a corporate perspective. So here's a key metric that actually weaves together some different surveys. So here what we could do is we could take department turnover. We could also combine exit interviews and help to understand why people are leaving. You could even add in your superstars, understanding why your stars stay with you on a regular basis, and combine that with your employee engagement and your turnover, as well as your resident engagement. So all of this can be customized to help you keep your eye on the prize as you think about long-term vision. You can also have this filter by individual communities. So each one of your executive directors at the individual communities would be able to understand quickly what their measurements, their outcome measurements were, and whether or not they were meeting the criteria for, that next raise or bonus. So this allows them the opportunity to just keep track of it on a regular basis. So that wraps up the opportunity that can be seized by working with a dynamic data portal that would give you some new and interesting insights outside of a static report. So I know Andrea is going to send out some information and the recording of this webinar, but here is our quick contact information to get into the Holler and email, and we could certainly work with you from that standpoint as well, but wanted to take a few moments to open up for any questions that might be had. So Andrea, I'm going to pass it back to you and see if there's any questions coming in.
Great. Thanks so much, Nikki. This is the first time I've seen the full data portal, and it's pretty amazing. What I loved, you can easily identify opportunities with how you sort and filter the different data points, and so it's not just all this information, but it's actually some executable information. So great job.
Thanks.
We have 2 questions that come in. The first is, how often should I measure engagement?
Great question. We have communities that do a variety of different things. We are finding more and more communities want to take a pulse and get those really quick temperatures of what's going on with the employees or with their residents. But we feel like a full annual study we recommend a full annual study on an annual basis. Like I said, as we looked at this key metric dashboard, there are opportunities for you to fold in some of those quick touch points with your annual survey. I think, we're hearing a lot about survey fatigue and that residents and employees don't want to be filling out surveys every month. But so if you want to do that, I think we can certainly find out a good timing. But the full engagement survey on an annual basis is what we recommend.
Great, thank you. Also, too, how can we increase supervisor engagement?
Great question. And I think going back to the slide that really helps you understand, if you look here, just pop back in. Here you can see on our demo slide, this is not Maplewood Park Place's information, but here you can see the engagement level from supervisor versus non-supervisor. So here in this scenario, you're seeing that the supervisor is pretty strongly connected and pretty engaged. So in that circumstance, what we would say is that the level of the non-supervisor's engagement is just a little bit further back than what we're seeing from the supervisor. So potentially the supervisor needs to be taught some concepts to engage their teams in new and different ways. So sometimes it's about leadership development for those supervisors to just really give them the resources necessary to help them kick up their level of engagement from the team to a new notch. And other times, sadly, there have been times where we've seen the supervisor engagement is much behind what we see from the non-supervisor. And then you have to have some of the hard conversations about, do we have the right supervisors in place within our organization? And are they going to be able to take us to that really palpable feeling of engagement the moment anyone walks through our doors. So it really all varies on the individual results. You must start with the data first. If you don't understand how people are feeling and you're simply making an assumption that the supervisors are engaged or unengaged, then you could potentially be making the wrong assumption. So it really is important that you are able to survey the supervisors and the non, understand their level of engagement, and then customize your results around what you're seeing from those.
Great, thank you. And Nikki, do you recommend doing resident and employee engagement studies at the same time?
I absolutely prefer having them done at the same time. So when they're done separately, you can make some practical correlation. When they're done together, you can often see much more deeply. So for example, there's a client that I'm working with who did their employee survey and their resident survey separately, and we saw some pretty big instances and challenges coming up in their dining services. But because they did the surveys at different times, we couldn't tell if there was something going on in the kitchen at the same time as something was going on from the resident's perspective out in the dining area. So doing them in tandem really allows you to understand much more closely if the challenges are correlated or if they're completely off base. So doing them together provides the most amount of insight.
Terrific. Another question that's come in, what are the best practices for increasing the engagement of dining services personnel? And that's always a tough one for this industry.
It absolutely is. And you know, one of the things when I speak with dining directors, and I always feel bad because when you look at our benchmark, you know, what bubbles to the top of our benchmark are how the residents feel about the team and how much they love the staff that's taking care of them every day. And what always bubbles to the bottom is poor dining services. And it just is, it's challenging to, you know, create a meal that everybody's going to fall in love with. But as you're trying to work with, you know, the dining services team, you really need to seek out your catalysts and your advocates, understanding those who are the most highly engaged, because they're going to be your cheerleaders and they're going to help you to work around and start to implement change that can be palpable. So understanding who your most highly engaged employees are, regardless of their age. I think we hear so much about, you know, the younger generation and how they're always on their phone. And, you know, sometimes I push back against that because I feel like sometimes it's a point in life. It's not a generation thing. It's just where they are at a certain time in life. And so I think we need to seek out and understand who our game changers are and then empower them to do something about it. So if you've got a 19-year-old in your dining services who really is heads and shoulders above everybody else, bring them into the conversation. Help to utilize their knowledge and expertise. So that's just one quick way on the floor, but then also seeking out others who maybe are doing really well within within a peer organization, such as a benchmark comparison, where we can mine our benchmark, find organizations who are doing really well in those, and then connect you for conversation. So there's, again, a ton of different ways to seek out best practices, and that's what we love to do with our clients, is that after the results are in and we start seeing where are your red flags, where are your opportunities for celebration, and then we can have a lot of conversation and collaboration to bring in people who are doing it well and other best practices that we're learning as we work with clients across the nation.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Nikki. Well, that's the last of the questions, and I want to thank you, Nikki, for your time and the great information you presented, and thank you for all who attended, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Goodbye, everyone.